Ladies, gentlemen, this is the Greatest Asset Community Podcast. I'm your host, Frederick Middlebrooks, and in this episode, we are going to be going into a comparison between buying and renting and looking at what's more advantageous in the short term, the long term, but overall, really just giving you some of the main factors that you should be using to compare whether or not it's best for you to continue to rent or whether it's best for you to look at purchasing and buying a home as well. So I will give a full disclosure. I am a licensed real estate agent. I am also a licensed loan originator or loan officer as well. And another disclosure, I'm recording this podcast outside, so you might hear the occasional plane fly overhead, siren, nature, whatever it may be. But we're going to get through this and you're going to get some great information out of this. So I'm going to pull up some slides as well, two in particular, to just go over some of the numbers that I've already pre-calculated for you so that you can get the most benefit out of making this comparison decision for yourself. So when you're going into purchasing a home, there are a lot of costs involved on the front end. A lot of those being the down payment that you have to pay for the home, the closing cost. You might have to pay discount points for your interest rate. And so adding up all those costs, it could be tens of thousands of dollars just for you to purchase a home. And when you go to sell a home, there are costs associated with selling a home as well. You might be paying commissions for the buyer and the seller's agent, or the listing agent and the selling agent as well, which is the agent that's representing the buyers. So there are those costs that you need to consider as well when you're looking to purchase a home. So factoring in all of those costs, in addition, you also have maintenance and repair costs that you want to estimate and at least make some, assessment for, because when you own a home, you are going to have repairs that are now your responsibility because you are the landlord, essentially. You own the property. So it's going to be your responsibility to make sure that anything that breaks gets fixed and repaired. So those are also costs that you want to factor in. And so with all of these costs with owning a home, is it worth it for you to make that investment, especially now when interest rates are at 8%, when home prices are as high as they've ever been? When you're renting, rental rates actually might be a little bit lower in some markets than what it might cost to purchase a home at an equivalent. If you're renting a 3-bedroom, 2-bath home and you want to purchase a 3-bedroom, 2-bath home, and depending upon the market that you're in, it might be cheaper for you to just rent that month to month rather than own. However, I want to give you a couple of other factors that you should consider in that decision that you're making. And one of them up front is going to be appreciation. So what is appreciation? Appreciation is the gradual increase in the value of your home over time. So for example, if you purchase a home that's, in the example that we use a $350,000 example. So we'll say $350,000. 5 years from now, 10 years from now, that home is not going to be worth $350,000. It's going to be worth more than that. And that increase over time in the value of that home is appreciation. That's one way that you build equity in a home. Equity is the difference between what that home is worth and what you owe on the home. So if you purchase a home for $350,000, and let's say you still owe $300,000 on it, and that home is worth $400,000, what you owe is $300,000, what it's worth is $400,000. So the equity is $100,000. That's $100,000 worth of equity that you have in that home, or you could say value that you have in that home that you can access or that you would potentially receive when you sell that home. So if you were to sell that home for $400,000, after you've paid whatever cost associated with selling the home, maybe it's your listing agent commission, the selling agent commission, whatever it might be, the remainder is what you would receive in cash. So equity is the value that you have in your home, which is the difference between what the home is worth and how much you still owe on that home. So when we're getting into other factors that you should be looking at, appreciation is one. And that's what helps you build equity, because your home is constantly getting more valuable over time, but the amount that you owe is becoming less and less and less. And that decrease in the amount that you owe is what we call amortization. So that's you paying your monthly mortgage payment on time. And by you paying your monthly mortgage payment on time, the amount that you owe is decreasing more and more and more which puts more equity in your home, because again, the equity is the difference between how much you owe and how much that home is worth. So as you pay down your mortgage, you owe less and less and less and less. And as that home becomes more and more valuable over time, it becomes more and more and more and more valuable. And you see that gap widen between how much the home is worth and how much you owe. And it just gets wider and wider, which means you have more and more equity in the home, more and more value, more that you can access to help you be able to do other things with. If you sell your home, that's more cash that you're going to receive back when you sell your home. If you want to do a cash out refinance, that's more cash that you potentially have access to get out of your home to use for other purposes, maybe to go purchase an investment property, maybe to make repairs to your current property, maybe to go buy a boat or take a vacation. Whatever you want to do with that money is up to you. However, that's what that equity is. So equity is very important when it comes to home ownership, because it plays into your net worth. If I have $100,000 of equity in a home, that's $100,000 that's going toward my net worth that I have. So those are the two things that you also want to consider when you're making this buy versus rent comparison. You're looking at how much do I have that I have remaining in a balance of a mortgage, but how much is this home also appreciating over time? So I will let you know that historically, homes are appreciating at an average rate of about 4.3%, and that's over the last 60 plus years. 4.3% has been about the average appreciation. So that means if you have a home, whatever the price of that home is, multiply that by 4.3%. That's about the average over the last 60 plus years that home has gone up in value. And that's important to know, because it's what we utilize in terms to calculate or to estimate what future home values will be. So in our example, and we'll get into that so that you can see it, we use a little bit more conservative numbers, so we don't go all the way up to the 4.3%. We're actually just going to use 3.2% and see what a $350,000 home might look like if you were to purchase that home, how much it would cost you compared to if you were to rent a home, similar home, for, let's say, $2,400. So I will pull up this screen share here so that you can see what we are looking at in terms of, would it be advantageous for you to be able to purchase that home, or would you be better off just renting that home? So getting on into it, and I'll make this full screen. All right, so this is what we're looking at here. We've got you buying a home for $350,000. Now, renting it, we're going to say you're going to rent this home for $2,400. Now, it's going to be $2,400 to start off with, but it's not going to stay at $2,400. And the reason is because, just like home prices go up over time, rental rates also go up over time. So if you start off renting a home at $2,400, maybe you come to renew that lease the next year, and the landlord's like, hey, that home price has gone up. Now we want $2,500 or whatever it might be. And so in following with the increase in home prices, rental rates also increase. So that's why you will see the increases here in the rental rates as well. However, your principal and interest payments when you purchase a home do not increase. The principal and interest stays the same. Now, it's possible taxes could increase if you have an increase in the tax records in the county taxes or anything like that where you pay taxes to, or if your homeowner's insurance company decides to increase your insurance rates, that could increase as well. But your principal and interest payments are set for typically 30 years, which is the most common length of time that many people get a mortgage for. So let's dive into this a little bit. We've got here buying a home, and we've calculated the principal and interest payments. And just so you know, this is all based on an 8% interest rate. So we're looking at current interest rates as they are today, 8% interest rate. So based on an 8% interest rate, your monthly principal and interest payments for a $350,000 home, if you were to put 3.5% down, which is the minimum for an FHA loan, your monthly principal and interest payments would be $2,478. Now, Included in your total mortgage payment are principal, interest, taxes, and insurance. So we also have property taxes and insurance estimated here at the $587. However, we've also included an additional $125. It could be more, it could be less, depends on the quality of the home and how long the appliances and everything that you have to repair or maintain in that home, what quality or condition they're in. But I just threw in an extra $125 a month for maintenance and repairs. So when you add all of this up, the monthly principal and interest, taxes, insurance, and a little bit for maintenance and repairs and everything, we get $3,190. Now that's the monthly payment. That's what we're going to use for this example as your monthly mortgage payment if you were to buy this home. Now, if you were to rent, $2,400 is what we're starting out with, and we're just going to say that you're paying $36 a month for insurance, essentially. So as you don't pay, it's listed here at property taxes and insurance, but you don't pay property taxes, you just pay the insurance. So that 36 is all going toward insurance, and that's just renter's insurance, which protects your belongings. So you pay $36, and you see here in year one, we are looking at $2,436 for your rent, $3,190 for your mortgage. Now that's a sizable difference. I mean, that's about what we have about $700, almost $800 difference between what you will cost you per month to purchase versus what it will cost you to rent. Now, if we continue to go up the scale, you will see that it goes, the principal and interest or the payments rather for purchasing a home stay consistent. However, your rent is going up and up and up throughout the years until we hit year 8, where now it's flipped and we've got more that we're paying, just slightly more that we're paying in renting than what we're paying as a homeowner. And as you can see, that becomes even more in year 9. And as you go into 10, 11, 12, 15, 20, it just gets even higher and higher with what you're paying more for rent than what you would pay for a mortgage, because again, your mortgage payments, principal and interest are set, and those do not change for that 30-year period that you have that mortgage. So we average the annual rent increase at 4%. Again, it could be well more than 4%. You have some places that experience a 6% or a 5% increase year over year. You have some that experience a 3% increase year over year. So we went a little bit slightly more on the conservative side and went with 4% year over year for the increase in your rent. Now, what is that cash flow difference? So the cash flow difference is the difference between how much money you're spending every month in renting versus how much money you're spending every month in owning. Now, as you can see, for and this is just for the 9 years that we did this example. So as you can see, for the 9 years of this example, over 9 years, we're spending about $38,000 more owning than what we would spend renting. And that's a sizable difference, $38,000 across 9 years. Again, this is almost, to start out in year 1, we're looking at almost $800 difference between owning versus renting. And so that's a big cash flow difference. However, if you only look at this number, then it's like, well, I should just be a renter. It makes more sense to be a renter because I have to hit year 8 before it even starts to flip. And then by year 9, it still hasn't flipped enough for this cash flow difference to not be in the negative, meaning I'm gonna have to go to maybe year 15 or year 16 before it's in the positive. Well, first of all, if you plan on living, the next 15, 16 years, it's still worth it to get somewhere where you're gonna eventually be on the plus side of things. But that put aside, it's not the only thing that you want to look at. You want to look also at what we just mentioned earlier, which is appreciation. This home is gaining value over time. And again, we use 3.23% as the forecasted appreciation for this home becoming more valuable. Now, we had the starting home value at $350,000. After 9 years, if this thing continues to appreciate at an average rate of 3.2%, this home's going to be worth over $460,000. So you have over well over $100,000 worth of equity, a little over $115,000 worth of equity in this home. That's value that you have in a home that you own. Now, we also talked about amortization. Amortization is you paying down the principal balance of your mortgage. So if you take the original loan balance, which is that $337,750, and again, that's the loan amount minus your plus your down payment. So if the price of the home is $350,000, your down payment 3.5% is why the loan amount is not $350,000. So that 3.5%, we subtract the 3.5% from that $350,000, and what's remaining is what you actually owe on your loan, and that loan amount is $337,750. So after 9 years of you making on-time mortgage payments, you have paid $35,677 towards the principal balance of the loan. That's the amount that you still owe. So you subtract that $35,677 from what you still owe, and you end up with $302,073. So now we have a home that's worth $465,000, and we only owe $302,000. So as you can see, that gap is even wider than where we would have started. Now we have equity of over $160,000 in this home. Now let's factor in some of the other things, because we want to show you all the costs. We're not trying to leave anything out. We want to let you see everything that it's going to cost you, let's say at the end of 9 years, if you decide to sell this home. Well, let's estimate that real estate commissions are going to be 3% toward the listing agent, 3% toward the selling agent. Real estate commissions are negotiable, but we're trying to use this just for example purposes. So we're going to estimate 3% for the listing agent, 3% for the seller, 6% to whoever, whatever. We'll say 6% real estate commissions. That's going to get you, and that's 6% off of the value 9 years from now, which would be the $465,000. That's going to cost you $27,000, almost $28,000. So you've got that cost to sell, and then you've got, the little tax benefit in there from the tax bracket that you're in as well. So we'll scroll on down and you can see your net gain. And this is the important slide here that you want to see. Your net gain by buying a home across the course of 9 years is going to be $77,000. We're looking at a $77,000 difference in terms of value, equity, net worth, if you will, that you will have by owning versus renting. So again, if your net worth is one thing, by you buying, you could potentially have $77,000 more of additional net worth at the end of 9 years by buying a home rather than renting. And that's because even though, like we showed you, the cash flow difference across 9 years puts you in the negative for buying a home by almost $39,000, you have so much more value in that home from appreciation, because that home has gotten more valuable over time, and you have more value in that home due to amortization, because you've been paying down that monthly mortgage payment to the tune of $35,000 that you've been paying down on that monthly mortgage payment. So you add up that $35,000 plus that $115,000, almost $116,000, and you are, again, we're up over we're up a lot of money in terms of how much you owe versus how much the house is now worth. So again, remaining principal balance 302, but that house is worth 465. So we've got a lot of equity in that home now. So down here, you can kind of see a little bit of what we're calculating here when you add in the appreciation and the amortization and the little tax benefit down there as well. And you subtract out your initial closing cost, you subtract out, and you might not notice also, we don't have a subtraction for your down payment. Why? Because your down payment is money that's going into a home that you own. You're not losing that money. So when you make a down payment on a home, That's equity that you're immediately putting into your home. That money is not being lost. That money doesn't go to a lender. That money doesn't go to an investor. That money is going into your home as equity. So what does go out is your initial closing costs. So we subtract the closing costs. We've got the cash flow difference that we subtract, and that's the difference between how much money we were paying on a monthly mortgage payment for those 9 years, subtracted from how much money we would have been paying on rent for those 9 years. So again, you would have spent, for our example, almost $39,000 less over 9 years for rent. So we subtract that 39,000 out, and then we subtract out the cost to sell that home if you decided to sell it after 9 years as well, which would be almost $28,000. So even if we subtract out 39,000, 28,000, and 12,000, we're adding 115,000, 35,000, 4,000. It's not even close. We're up over 77,000 in terms of how much more you benefit from actually owning that home. Again, it pays for you to actually look at this from a vantage point that is more broad in terms of all the expenses and all of the gains on both sides, not just looking at the month to month. If you do just look at the month to month, you're going to miss the biggest benefit of ownership, which is the appreciation. And this is the reason why many people say it's better to own than to rent. It's not just the month to month of, eventually you get to that point where now it's cheaper for me to rent this home than what it will be for me to, or it's cheaper for me to own this home than what it would be for me to rent this home 10 years from now or 12 years from now. And of course, you're going to be living somewhere 10 to 12 years from now. So it's, it makes sense for you to, want to be in somewhere that in the long term would be cheaper. However, in the short term, it might cost you a little bit of, angst, a little bit of pain. However, that appreciation gain plus the amortization gain are the two major reasons why many advocates, myself included, will tell you that it is better to purchase. And if you leave out this part and you only look at the short term, month to month, you'll never get there in terms of being able to see the benefit. You need to be able to see the entire thing. Now, two things that I want to point out really quick. One, you notice there's red here in years 1, 2, and 3. So the net gain by buying a home is actually negative for the first 3 years of this example. What that means is that if you were to purchase a home, but you plan to sell it within the first 3 years, it's actually more advantageous for you to just rent, because you're not actually going to start being in the positive from owning a home until you've owned it, for this example, at least 4 years. Now, for some examples, depending upon what numbers you're using for your scenario, maybe it's advantageous after 3 years. Maybe it's advantageous after 5 years. Before our example here, you're not going to see that benefit for you owning a home until you hit year 4. So again, that's something that you want to be aware of. And this is something that a loan officer can go through with you as well, in terms of letting you know, hey, how long do you plan on living here? Okay, you only plan on being here 2 years. Okay, after you move out, are you going to keep this property? Because if you're going to keep it, this can still make sense for you, because you're still going to own the property. You're still going to have those mortgage payments. That property is still going to be increasing in value, and this can still be of much benefit to you. But if you're going to sell that property, when you add up the cost, meaning the closing cost to purchase the property, and you add up the cost to sell the property, it's not going to be worth it for you to purchase this property, because you've got the monthly mortgage payment, you've got all the costs to buy it, and then all the costs to sell it, and you add all that up, the amount of appreciation gain that you've had over just 2 years is not going to be enough to offset all of the costs associated within that first 3 years. So again, this shows you that, hey, if you sold that thing after 1 year, you're losing out on 22,000. After 2 years, you're still losing out on 14. After 3 years, you're losing out on 7,000. But in that 4th year, you're now in the positive by 1900. Fifth year, 13,000. Sixth year, 25,000. And it just keeps growing exponentially. So again, you want to know what your plan is for the house, how long you plan on staying there, and how long you actually plan on keeping the house as well. So the last thing, that was the first thing that I wanted to tell you. The last thing is that all of this scenario is based on an 8% interest rate. However, what happens if your interest rate does not stay at 8%? What if your interest rate goes lower than 8%? What if interest rates drop back down to 6%? You know what you're going to do? You're going to refinance into a 6% rate. But what does that look like? So I'll pull up this other scenario that I had. Everything in this scenario is the same. The only thing that is different is the interest rate. That is all that I changed with the scenario, is the interest rate. So same everything except the interest rate. Now you see with the 6% interest rate, instead of us breaking even at the 8-year mark, now the rental payments exceed the monthly mortgage payments by the 4-year mark. We cut that time in half. That's huge. That's 4 extra years of now you're in the positive. And look what it did to our cash flow difference. Over the same 9-year period, now we're looking at $10,000 more that we're actually going to make over a 9-year period in owning a home versus renting. We're going to have a $10,000 difference in cash flow over that 9 years. So that's huge. You're looking at over $1,000 a year more that you will have in your pocket because you chose to own rather than rent across those 9 years. So that's huge. And this is, again, just by going from an 8% interest rate to a 6% interest rate, which is very possible because interest rates fluctuate up and down all the time. So let's look at our appreciation gain. Still the same, homes appreciating at the same value. So again, our interest rate does not affect how much the home is appreciating. It still has that same value of appreciation. But let's look at our amortization gain. That's how much we're paying down on the principal balance of that mortgage. That's gone up significantly. Why? Because when you're paying a smaller interest rate, that means more of each month's payment is going toward paying down the principal balance of the loan. And so since more of each month's payment is going toward paying down what you owe on the loan, now instead of owing $302,000 when we had an 8% interest rate with a 6% interest rate, now we only owe $289,000, which gives us $47,000, almost $48,000 in amortization gain. And check this out. Look what it did to our net gain by buying a home. It did a couple things. One, $134,000. We were at $77,000 previously, which was still good over 9 years to be up $77,000 by owning rather than renting in terms of the net gain that you have as a homeowner. However, by refinancing into a 6% interest rate, when interest rates drop, we went from $77,000 almost $50,000 more to $134,000. It's about $47,000 jump. So that is a huge jump now. In 9 years, we've got $134,000 that we can play with now. Now, again, we still have the same cost with the cost to sell. Again, 6% of the future value, that's not changing. Future value is the same. The 6% of that future value, we're still looking at about $28,000 in terms of what we have to pay in real estate commissions to sell that home if we pay that 6%. And we still have the upfront cost of when we purchased the property, which was closing costs. But now a huge differentiator, we were at almost $38,000. We were around $38,000 with the cash flow difference in the negative when we had an 8% interest rate. We were in the negative for the cash flow difference. And even being in the negative at an 8% interest rate, we still had a better net gain by owning. However, now that we're in the positive by $10,000, we've completely swung that pendulum in the other direction. Now that's what's really affecting this net gain by owning a home to make it $134,000. So if you choose to rent, then this is the number of what you are really missing out on. But however, if interest rates were at 6%, this is also the number that you're missing out on across 9 years. You're missing out on $10,000. You're paying that extra 10,000. And this 10,000 also, again, we're looking at what you're paying every single month. But again, don't forget to factor in all your cost to close and everything like that. So we're factoring in all of this when we're looking at this bigger number of 134,000. So if you choose to rent, again, this is what you're missing out on. And one last thing that is, you see, looking at this table here, the years that were in the red has been cut from 3 to 2 just by changing our interest rate from 8 to 6. Again, that is all that was changed. Everything else remained the same. And you see that in year 1, if we were only going to stay here a year, it doesn't make sense, because we'd be in the whole 16,000. If we're only staying here 2 years, it doesn't make sense. We're going to be in the whole 2,500. However, in year 3 now, rather than waiting till year 4, now in year 3, we're in the positive $11,000, 26,000 in year 4, 44,000 in year 5. It just keeps going up exponentially. And the longer you own that home, you can see the more and more that you're building wealth here. Imagine what this looks like if you own 2 properties, 3 properties, 4 properties. If you have renters in all of these properties, now your renters are paying your mortgage. So not only are you benefiting from having this appreciation and your homes are getting more and more valuable over time, you're not even putting the amortization in there. Your renters are putting the amortization in there because they're the ones that are paying your mortgage. So again, this is some of the stuff that I just wanted to show you in this podcast to give you a little sneak peek and show you some of the stuff that you should be looking at and some of the things that you should be calculating when you're looking at purchasing a home or renting. Which one's better? Don't just look at the short term and say, oh, it's going to be a lower monthly payment for me to keep renting. Yes, in many instances, it will be a lower monthly payment, especially initially, for you to keep renting. But eventually, that will catch up with you at some point, whether it catches up with you at year 8, 9, 10, or whether it catches up with you at year 4, 5, or 6. Eventually that does catch up with you. However, yes, you don't want to have a short-term focus when it comes to making this comparison. You want to look at the entire picture, because 8 years from now, 10 years from now, if you can make those sacrifices to be able to put yourself in a home, we're talking about some life-changing differences that it can make to you in terms of you still have this same mortgage payment 10 years, 15 years, 20 years from now, but your net worth is so much more. And with this type of net worth, if you wanted to do a cash out refinance, you could take a percentage of that money out and go buy another home and start the process all over again and build up another $100,000, $200,000, $300,000 of equity in that home as well. We're talking now about doing some things that are going to build wealth for you and your family, leave a legacy for your grandkids and your great grandkids. We're talking about things that can really just transform your life, but also the lives of your family members, and really be a benefit to the community as well, because I'm a firm believer that when individuals, not corporations, are owning the majority of the real estate in any given area, I just think is better overall for the community. You're invested in the community, and I think that it just plays better for society. And there are some statistics that prove that as well. So that is all that I have for you today. As always, please do like and subscribe to the podcast. You can find me at GA Loan Officer. Again, that's at GA Loan Officer on Instagram and TikTok. I am Frederick Middlebrooks on LinkedIn. And so please do give me your feedback. I'd love to hear what it is that you like about the podcast. I'd love to hear what you would like to see or what you would like to learn about on the podcast. So I'm doing this for you. I just have a really strong passion and a heart to help individuals find ways that they can get into homes, purchase properties, and improve their quality of life. So thank you for tuning in. And as always, take care, be blessed.